always remember the great drought, when it didn't rain for 2 years. There was no water. All the crops died, and the trees perished, and everything was blackened, scorched from the sun. There were fires all the time. You could smell the burnt earth and the burned trees. The people tried everything to make it rain. They called in the local medicine men, who chanted and blew strange horns and paraded about and painted themselves odd colors. And then the birds stopped coming. One morning I woke up and there were no birds, and all the livestock got skinnier and skinnier and started to die. First they just stand very, very still, and then just before they died, they'd suddenly become hysterical, run madly around, stand up on their hind legs, turn over on their backs, flail their hooves, and would pass away in convulsions. And sometimes clouds would appear in the distance, and everybody would gather. The whole town would come out, and it would get cooler, and the air would feel moist and heavy. And then, just when it looked like the rain would start, a wind would come up and blow the clouds away, or the sun would break through. There was a lake on a mountainside that used to have many streams. And first, the streams dried up, and then the lake seemed to drain away. And there were fires everywhere. Things would just suddenly catch fire in the middle of the day. Like a whole vegetable garden would suddenly get so hot, it would just burst spontaneously into flame. In fact, there were a few people in the village who just exploded from the heat. I remember watching my little sister playing with her toys, when suddenly smoke started to come from her ears and nose, and she got up and began to jump around wildly. And her hair started to smolder, and smoke started to come from the soles of her feet. And then I heard a pop, and she just exploded from within. And after she exploded, all that was left were a few charred bones and her doll. And because of the water shortage, the people of the village couldn't bathe, and we all began to smell so bad that we couldn't live together in the same house. People would separate and dig their own little holes, and there was no shade because all the trees had burned and died. And once, we all went to the church on the hill to pray for rain, and our chanting and dancing only seemed to heat up the church even more. And as a result, smoke started to pour from the altar, and from the ceiling, and from the bell tower, and the hymn books burst into fire, and the holy water started to smoke, and the vestments and the cloaks and the priest's garb started to curl up with little flames licking, and the statues melted. We all thought that the drought was a terrible judgment from God, and there was much debate in the town as to what we were being punished for. And my uncle was stoned to death because he had married his sister, and someone said that he was the cause of the drought. Well, that didn't do any good. It didn't change anything. So they hanged the person who convinced everybody that my uncle was responsible. And that didn't do any good either. Then a cult started. They worshipped the sun and sacrificed themselves. They were called the Friars. They'd shave their heads, pour tallow and goose fat all over their bodies, and would wait until midday, which was considered the most religious time because the sun was at its zenith. And they'd walk to the dried up lake, to the lake bed, and let the sun burn them to a crisp and die. And eventually the lake bed was strewn with bones. And this didn't bring the rain either. And during this horrible time, when everybody was pleading for rain, there was one character who was building a boat, a crazy old man in the town whose wife and family had been the first to go when the drought came. And he would go out every morning and continue building this giant boat. And he warned everybody that after the drought, there would be a horrible rain. And we all laughed at him and mocked him, and he became the fool of the town. Sometimes we'd go to where he was building his boat and just stand there, throw sand at him, and call him silly names. He was a ridiculous figure. He kept on warning us, "You'll be sorry. You'll see. I'll be the only one left. I'll outlive you all. I'll sail away in the boat while all the rest of you drown in the flood." And we thought it was the end of the world and that everything was going to be over. And so we finally gave up. We stopped praying. We stopped sacrificing ourselves. And we abandoned hope. Yes, it was the end. Nothing mattered anymore. We were just going to die. So we went into the town square and took off our clothes and burned them in a big fire. And then, when we were just about to throw ourselves in the fire, the sky got cloudy, and it proceeded to rain for 3 months. And there was a flood, and the flood took away all our possessions, whatever livestock was remaining. Everything was swept away. And the crazy old man who'd built the boat, who'd found a woman who believed in him, packed all his food and his provisions, climbed aboard with her, and the boat surged forward, went about 30 feet, turned over, and they drowned. And I caught hold of an uprooted tree trunk and managed to stay afloat. And I was carried by the flooding water to a distant country where I was adopted by another family because my original family was wiped out. And it turns out that, as far as I know, I was the only one who survived the flood. The tribe of my adoptive family were farmers who worked the fields. And there was another tribe of hunters and predators who were particularly brutal. They would mount raids against us. Someone would be out guarding the livestock, and they'd sneak up on him, hold him down, bury his head in the sand, cut off his thumbs, and run off with them. And people in the town who'd had their thumbs cut off started to act like animals. They lost the power of speech, crawled about on all fours, and were eventually domesticated as household pets. And then, finally, this neighboring tribe of carnivores mounted a full-scale attack. I escaped by burying myself in the earth and breathing through a reed. I could hear people crying and screaming above ground. And these two events, the drought and the invasion, became the defining experiences of my life. Through them, I learned that nature can be cruel, and people can be even crueler. State of crisis. I felt a sense of emptiness, devastated by the total meaninglessness of my life, and life in general. I stood in the rabbi's study, looking at richly rubbed mahogany furniture, volumes of the Talmud, the Mishnah, the Kabbalah,
the 5 books of Moses. There was a globe of the ancient world, with Judea as the center of the universe. Moldering piles of maps, ancient diplomas covering the walls bearing the seals and symbols of Eastern European universities. Heavy rabbinical robes hung on a coat rack in the corner, along with a catter's mitre, a kaftan, a beaver hat, and a set of muddy Russian boots. A loaf of thick, coarse black bread lay on the desk with a carving knife in it. There was a fiddle in the corner, a set of architectural plans for an elaborate tabernacle unrolled with a T-square and draftsman's divider's lines on it. The room was thickly carpeted with Persian rugs, and the windows were leaded glass, with scenes depicted from the Old Testament. Rachel at the well, Abraham about to sacrifice Isaac, Esau being ejected from the Garden of Eden, the passage of the Israelites through the Red Sea, the image of Bathsheba bathing. In a first-class compartment, I sit next to a large peasant woman holding a cage full of chickens. Across from me is an exquisitely beautiful young girl, a babushka tied in her golden hair, covering, for modesty's sake, long braids coiled on top of her head. She's wearing a frilled peasant blouse over a coarse burlap smock, a pair of heavy black farm boots encrusted with mud. In her lap is a small prayer book in Cyrillic script. She fingers a string of beads at the end of which dangles a heavy wooden cross. Her eyes are red-rimmed. She's obviously been crying. She gazes fixedly out the window. I look out the window too and see verdant farmland, rolling hills, thatch-roofed villages gliding by, idyllic scenes of cows and horses, shepherds with their flocks on mountainsides, white puffy clouds sweeping across an azure sky. Everywhere the valley is green, all in bloom. I can see orchards, peach, pomegranate, pear. And suddenly overcome by a wave of nausea, grasping my throat, I leave the room and stagger down the hallway, my right hand outstretched, blinded by the impulse to spew the extravagant lunch, the garlic sausage, frosty Pilsner beer, and reeking cheeses of the Danube valleys that Würzburger bought me in Prague. And kneeling before the toilet, a vision comes to me. My father, carving one of the many painted wooden dolls that lined the shelves and mantelpieces of our simple home. And then a man enters the room, looks at me, and says, "Is this the dining car?" I look at him, and I can see the humorous glint in his eye, the mischievous twinkle, as though he were baiting me, challenging me, drawing me out. Could this be my moment of transfiguration? Yes. Could this be what I've been waiting for all my life? I embrace him. He shrinks back and says, "Of course this isn't. How foolish of me," and unceremoniously turns his back, leaves, and the door closes. I stand there staring after him, still shuddering with the deliciousness of the encounter, the beauty of his succinctness. And when I return to my chair, the young woman is gone. The chickens are dead, and the fat peasant woman has removed all her clothes and is stretched out on the seat, staring at me with a lewd smile. We're digging in the Upper Nile at the pyramid of Amun-Ra II, and we have unearthed a cemetery, an ancient graveyard, where sacred burial urns are contained within the holy precincts of the city of the dead. We come upon a great sarcophagus, its stone lid elaborately carved, depicting a jackal-headed god grasping flaming arrows shot from an enormous bow, its eyes focused on a point somewhere over the horizon. The creature possesses a power in its image alone, enough to freeze the archaeologist in his tracks. And there is a sandstorm descending from the sky. But we keep on digging with excitement, our trowels and shovels driven by the insane desire to unearth this city of the dead. And we're sweating, exhausted, our throats parched, our eyes clouded, our hair matted and thick with grit. Professor Crosley has a mallet and a sculptor's chisel with which he carefully works the edge of the sarcophagus lid, when we hear a strange noise emanating from within. What is it? We can feel it in our fingertips as we touch the edge of the sarcophagus. Crosley puts a champagne glass to the top and presses his ear against the bottom of the glass. And what he hears sounds almost musical, vaguely rhythmic, insistent. He says, "I know this sounds insane, but I think I hear voices." Is that laughter? Not possible. It must be an auditory hallucination brought on by the wind, the lack of drink, the long day's efforts, the shades of night as they fall. Professor Crosley, now livid with excitement, his hands trembling, watches as Donahue and Valparaiso, two of the larger archaeological assistants, help him open the sarcophagus. The veins stand out on their foreheads. Their muscles bulge. They grit their teeth. Sweat explodes from their brows. Their eyes pop as they strain with superhuman effort to lift the cover. And slowly, the huge stone slab grinds open a crack. And the first thing that strikes us is a shaft of light emanating from within. And more open, and further still, until finally the slab falls back. And we realize we've uncapped a skylight and are gazing down into a huge dining room where we can see a white tablecloth trestle upon which is laid a magnificent meal, roasted meats, pies, jewel-encrusted flagons filled with ruby red liquid. There's a small orchestra on a platform towards one end with a conductor, a short fat man wielding a baton with what appears to be the scalp of a wild animal tacked to the end. The room decorated with balloons, streamers, gray paper ribbons, and bouquets of flowers. A huge sign in hieroglyphics, which the professor quickly translates, "Welcome home." A crowd of people around the buffet table gathers in animated conversation, clinking glasses, and another group of people dances on the polished floor. A knot of young women stands giggling, covering their mouths with handkerchiefs as they laugh. And an elderly man is pulling coins from the ears of delighted young children, while an impossibly tall and emaciated boy, wearing thick glasses, is performing what appears to be card tricks to the delight of a group of teenagers. And a pot-bellied middle-aged man seems to be telling dirty jokes in a corner to three amused old cronies who are splitting their sides with laughter. And we all, Professor Crosley and Donahue and Valparaiso and I and the others, stare down through the skylight in utter amazement, feeling the oppression of loneliness, knowing that this is a party to which we were not invited, for which we are perhaps thousands of years too late. Cape Cod. It's dusk. The beach is empty as far as I can see. There are storm clouds. The tide is going out. And there's a kind of fishy seaweed smell. The gulls are starting to light on the sandbar and call to each other. Suddenly, it turns cold and windy. And when I was walking one way down the beach, I felt no breeze at all because the wind was behind me. But now I've turned and I'm walking back the other way. And I feel chilled. And the salt is blowing in my face. Then I see an old beat-up pickup truck in the distance. And I'm just walking along, minding my own business. But the truck seems headed directly towards me. I try to get out of the way and walk a little bit closer to the water's edge. And the truck turns slightly to line itself up with me. And I suddenly wonder if someone's going to try to run me down. But the truck pulls up, and this big, paunchy old guy gets out. And then, suddenly, I see my favorite hat, the hat I lost 3 months ago, blow past me. And I can't quite believe my eyes. I watch it skittering along the sand, blown by the wind, holding the subpoena in my hand, wondering.
Tan and young and lovely, the girl from Ipanema goes walking, and when she passes, each one she passes goes.
I'm singing in a jazz club. There's so much smoke and bright lights in my eyes that it's hard to see anything. I feel chilled, but I'm sweating, and my mouth is dry. There are tables, a bar. The television is on playing a prize fight. And everybody's talking. I see a woman sitting in the back, dressed in black, wearing giant sunglasses. Even as big as they are, she still looks very sophisticated and European. And there are 3 big, fat, bald men in fancy silk suits, smoking cigars, sitting down in front, flirting with the waitress, eating sloppily, spilling their drinks, and laughing. And a couple very fashionably dressed who are eating slowly and carefully while staring blankly into space. They say nothing to each other. They don't respond to me. And I have 2 contradictory thoughts in my head. One is, here I am, doing exactly what I've always wanted to do, sing in a jazz club. And the other is, how soon can I get out of here? I don't even like my singing very well, and the band doesn't sound very good, and the place is dirty and smoky. When can I leave here and get a beer and go to sleep? And because I know that nobody's listening, and nobody cares anyway, I begin to say things that come into my head right in the middle of the song.
Just look at you. You 3 fat slobs at the front table. You failed fake losers. You're disgusting morally. You're disgusting aesthetically. You're disgusting even to think about. And you, in the back, with those absurd sunglasses. You stupid, hopeless cow. You piece of trash. And that married couple over there. Can't you see you're dead inside? Why did you even come in here and waste my time? Why do I work so hard trying to please people for whom I have such contempt? When all I can think about is this terrible craving I have to eat cream of wheat. It's taken over my life.
What is death? If I put the barrel of a gun against my forehead and pull the trigger, what will happen? Where will I go? I wonder if expressions we have come casually to use when referring to death actually reflect reality. For example, the term, bought the farm. Could it be that when I die, I will actually come into possession of a farm I purchased with my own money? Is it possible? I bought the farm. I have acres of rolling meadows dotted with clover where sheep and cattle graze. Fields of wheat heavy with grain appear like a great amber ocean, undulating in the wind. I move into a white clapboard house with a shingled roof. The green shuttered windows have parted chintz curtains. Beside the house is a great ancient oak tree, its roots gnarled and twisted. From one of its thick old branches, hanging by a braided rope, is a rubber tire in which many a delighted child is swung up to the sky and back again. Inside my farmhouse, there's a living room with an ancient Emerson radio. The furniture has slipcovers with paisley print, and there's a hooked rug on the oak-planked floor. And in the dining room, farmhands sit at a long trestle table, drinking cups of steaming coffee with double-thick cream, eating a big country breakfast. Sunny side and scrambled eggs, crisp bacon, sizzling juicy sausages, pork chops, corned beef hash, sourdough biscuits, hush puppies and cornbread, a great bubbling warm jug of maple syrup next to a pile of pancakes browned at the edges. Fragrant thick slices of French toast sprinkled with cinnamon and sugar, bowls of oatmeal and farina topped with cream, melted butter and molasses, vials of insulin, Dilantin, and small bottles of oxygen being administered by paramedics to farm workers as they deliriously push themselves away from the table and stagger toward the door, each blood-thinning agent, anticoagulant, seizure control medication being injected by a hypodermic needle. The farm hands and red-cheeked farm girls operate the machinery, sluice out the pigsties, repair the fences, seed the corn, and milk the cows who move leisurely among the clover, gather around the salt cowlick, the lowing of their voices and the gentle tinkling of the bells around their necks heard at a great distance. The hoedown, or hootenanny, is a celebration that takes place in the barn, where one of the elders, holding a jug of corn liquor in one hand, calls the square dance. The farm hands wear blue overalls and checked shirts with bandanas around their necks. The girls in gingham dresses, black stockings, high button shoes, some in bonnets, others with cloth tied around their hair. They dance the Virginia reel exuberantly on the floor of the barn. And so, there I am. I've bought the farm, and it all seems so idyllic. A heavenly reward. The only problem is that I borrowed a lot of money from the bank for seed, livestock, and machinery. And now I owe thousands of dollars to the First National Trust. My monthly payments exceed my income. I'm borrowing from friends and church members. Finally, I put on a yard sale in which I sell family heirlooms to strangers. The ancient hand-carved armoire brought from the old country on the back of my grandfather, sepia-tinted Civil War portraits of long-dead ancestors, the cut crystal chandelier from the entrance hallway. And unable to make my mortgage payments, I am facing foreclosure. My entire farm is about to be razed for a new shopping mall. My family, having barricaded itself, having pushed furniture up against the doors, boarded the windows from the inside, awaits the sheriff. He arrives saying, "I'm sorry, I hate to have to be the one to do this," and hammers a writ of foreclosure on the door. I come out and stand on the front porch with a shotgun in my hands, an old double-barreled rusted-out Remington with a rotten wooden stock. I'm still wearing my long johns. The foreman, standing behind the sheriff, has a bored look. He's taken his hard hat off, and his long hair in a ponytail hangs down his back. He's got a hand on one hip, and in the other, he's holding a clipboard and looking over my shoulder, distractedly taking the dimensions of my house, and eyeing my mother, who's huddled behind me. "Look, I have my orders," the foreman says. "If you need a few minutes to get your stuff together, go right ahead. But by noon, I've got to have this thing." He gestures at my house. out of the way. So put that gun down, because it's not going to do you any good. This is progress. Even if you want to, you can't stand in its way. No matter what you say or do, it's like shouting against the fall of night. Forget it. Give in. It'll be a nice mall. Maybe your mother would like a job. There are some sales positions open at Laura Ashley. Behind the foreman is a 3-story tall bulldozer, a huge home-wrecking ball suspended from the end of a giant crane, and behind that a set of road grading machinery, cement mixers, flatbed trucks with construction crews and hard hats, with riveting machinery and walkie-talkies. And 3 deputies with sledgehammers and a battering ram bash their way through my barricaded front door. Then the heavy machinery comes through and levels the house and the barn, and my entire farm is overrun in a matter of an hour and a half. And within a week, a new shopping mall has been built. A huge 2-story atrium-centered gleaming marble and stainless steel structure with huge vaulted archways, waterfalls, and interior gardens, a giant clear glass dome over the top. A small jazz combo plays at one end and a string quartet at the other. A man in cutaway and tails, white tie and spats sits at a piano on the second level, near where a miniature railroad train takes children squealing and laughing around a small circuit, while shoppers ride scenic elevators that move on vertical monorails. And having been dispossessed, and having lost my farm, I find myself driving to California in a 1932 pickup truck, because I've learned that California is the land of golden opportunity, a Garden of Eden, a paradise where I can get a job picking oranges. But I am somewhat incredulous and perturbed by the fact that I thought I had bought the farm, and now I've lost the farm, and I don't know if I'm living or dead. I was singing in the Pelican Lounge when I felt compelled to go through my pockets. I found a hotel key, a harmonica, a pine cone, a field guide for identifying shrubbery, an expanding cuff for a blood pressure meter, a tranquilizing suppository, brown rice, an egg containing a religious diorama of Calvary, a canister of mace, a windsock,
syllables. It may be composed of first names only, but it's my name, and I have to live with it, and so do other people. No, let's hold it. Let's do it again. Joe Frank. And I'm proud of being Joe Frank. Because that's me, that's who I am. Although it's only a name. I mean, am I really Joe Frank? Or is that just some two words that are going to apply to who I am, but I'm really just this thing, this organism with a name, Joe Frank. No, never mind. Hold it. Stop.
I'm sorry. I'm too tense. I drank too much. I've been thinking about the office. I'm tired, I'm distracted, I'm upset. I can't stand the sound of the rain on the window pane. I don't know what's been happening to me lately. Maybe it's the fact that Iris is visiting this weekend with the children. I've been anxious about Fellshire's report. The thought of the tax audit on Thursday has been plaguing me. Maybe it's the weather. The ever-widening hole in the ozone layer, the destruction of the rainforest, the wanton murder of baby harp seals is making me very unhappy. I think the paint fumes from the trim job have been poisoning me. My left eye has been wandering. Have you noticed? And sometimes I feel an ineffable sadness. My father's illness has been a source of pain and distraction. Yesterday, he called from the nursing home to tell me they were changing a solution. And I just don't know how to deal with it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm lighting the wrong ends of my cigarettes. I'm using erasers to fill in the forms at work. I mailed the telephone to Sharper Image and expected to receive my credit card in return. I've been attempting to spend toilet paper. I need more time. I need more money. I need more attention. I need softer bathroom tissue. I need to scratch the festering underside of my latent dream world. I need less petroleum jelly and more grit. I need to turn my back and shrug my shoulders. I need child guards on the windows and shorter rubber bands on my retainer. I need whalebone stays in the corset of my life's forgotten days. I need new sources of information and new approaches to old problems. Look, he dropped his briefcase. Her garment bag fell open. Is that a $20 bill? Whose credit card is that? I think we went through a stop sign. I think there's something wrong with my orthodontist. His use of baling wire to shore up my dentures. His insistence in staple gunning gaffer's tape in place of temporary fillings is very distressing. If you'd only disregard the last phone message I left, then we can start fresh. Then you can pretend that I'm not what you think. And if you'd only accept my transplant, then you'd have 2 livers. I hate circus clowns because they're indifferent to national emergencies. I hate brown paper bags wrapped in string because they're always accompanied by rock storms. I hate house painters because when they travel, they have reckless disregard for misplaced passports and lost currency. I've seen this happen many times. I've stood by powerless witnessing house painters attempting to shove drachma into a French vending machine. And I hate jazz musicians because they always get stuck in the turnstile. I hate people who see through me because I'm afraid of what I stand between. Last night I discovered blue pencil corrections and proofreaders' notes scattered throughout my diary. I'd say that parsing the grammar of my sentences portrays a coldness, an errant disregard for my feelings, which I always knew existed. Oh, for the verbs that do not agree, the participles that refuse to dangle, for the pluperfect in lieu of the active past. How I would befriend the subjunctive of your corrections, for the interrogative of life's deepest mysteries. Last night, as the teacups rattled on the saucers, as the walls undulated, as the fish tank overflowed and the fissures in the carpet opened, I thought of Richardson's casual sarcasm concerning my recent facelift, of Spitz's disparaging remarks about my finger rolls, of Lipstein's lewd reference to my daughter, and swore an oath of vengeance. You know, lately I've been reading abridgments of Guy de Maupassant's stories.
along with the Torah-like endless scroll of my hospital chart, the seismic record of my digestive and pulmonary actions, my bile excretions, stool fecundity, sperm count, cell regeneration, skin loss, dilation of the duodenum, volatility of my blood. Last night I dreamt an endless toilet paper-like roll of dollar bills flowed from my pocket, the core itself fragrant, edible, and highly nourishing. You left me in a parachute harness, moth-eaten and threadbare, in a restaurant where, unencumbered by federal bias laws, they refused to serve my religious persuasion, in spite of the fact that the wind riffled my hair and blew your frock coat about you in a sexually threatening manner. You left me in a waiting room, the tile floors reverberating with the exquisite anguish of family members awaiting the results of exploratory surgery, while the meter ticked in the taxi outside, and geese in their cuneiform flight pattern winged their way toward a southern climate. You left me in the lawyer's office while members of our family sat suffocating in the Volkswagen bus in the parking lot, baking to a golden brown in the unrelenting sunlight that poured down, while I, in an over-air-conditioned room, dressed in wet bathing trunks, shivered as the lawyer described my financial ruin, the litany of suits in which I was named, federal indictments for insider trading, the rejection of my copyright standards, the reversal of my paternity order, the denial of the refusal to quash the reversal of my motion to suppress. Don't ever go through my sock drawer again, because if you do, I'll hold my breath till my face turns blue and stand on my head and moon at you, 'cause the birds don't sing and the sun don't shine till Daddy comes home to this gal of mine. Last night I dreamt I was carrying an enormous paper bag filled with the heads of the bus driver, the girl in the manicure salon, the salesman at the compact disc emporium, and the hygienist in my dentist's office, all chanting a litany of mockery, making fun of my carefully sewn party costume. Let me hold your coat while I relieve myself. Let me hold your tongue while you brush my teeth for greater intimacy. Lately, I've been thinking about fixing the crack in my driveway, removing the asbestos, reseeding my hairline. I've been wondering who you thought I had actually sent over when in fact I showed up myself, who you assumed was at the door when you answered with that smile on your face. I'll never forget when Fenstermeyer put his arm around my shoulder and reassured me that despite my impending indictment, the covert support of Wallerstein would be forthcoming, although not from an expected place. And now Lucille's called me to tell me that she's had Roy's vasectomy reversed. I am not crazy. I don't care what anyone says. I am not concerned with the opinions of others. As a matter of fact, I'm impervious to criticism. I know that people talk about me, and why shouldn't they? I should think that anybody who is concerned with what is current nowadays would be talking about me, so I really don't give a damn. But it's really amusing and sometimes mildly distressing to see the kind of deep satisfaction, the kind of gossipy pleasure that people can take from discussing others. And it's so easy when someone's not around to defend himself. While I'm away, don't I become an easy target? While I'm not present, isn't it simple to attack me? What a pleasure it must be to get up on a pedestal and judge others. What a petty privilege. There's really a patronizing superior attitude that people assume when they talk about you in your absence. The cheap cocktail party and garden set psychologist, fortune cookie psychoanalysis, and frankly, I find it amusing and diverting sometimes to catalog the postmortems after my radio programs, the paternalistic autopsies, these theories that people spin about who I am and what makes me tick. It's really comical, beneath contempt, pathetic, and mildly amusing in a kind of sad way that people would spend as much time as they do on creating these scenarios of analysis to interpret who I am, what my motivations are, why I act as I do. And now, some people say I'm crazy. But after all, which is really madness, to be one of the last of the free thinkers, intellectually unafraid, or to be a sheep following a Judas goat to the intellectual slaughter, to be a lemming following the unseen force of nature, slamming into the waves of an ocean shore, to be one of the crowd, of the flock, winging and honking its way southward, a member of the rising tide of conformity, the silent majority, a slavish follower of form and fashion. I feel as a public broadcaster that it is my responsibility to be a guardian of the common weal, of the public health, of the probity and the sanity of my general listening audience. Now, some people call my programs disturbing and unsettling. They turn off their radios and are forced into a fetal position. They drive off the road and sit silently. But does this mean I am the disturbed one? What is crazy? How can you assess madness? A man in India forsakes the powers of speech and sits down upon a seashore and for the next 40 years of his life remains silent, and he is elevated to the status of avatar. Ashrams are dedicated around the country to him. He is apothecized, and upon his departure, shrines and great religious tabernacles are dedicated to his role here on earth, simply because he has forsaken the powers of speech and has sat down cross-legged in a lotus position upon a beach in India, and for the next 40 years of his life has spoken not one syllable. But was he mad? So who is crazy? Just because I do not conform, because I am the Steppenwolf, because I would turn my back on the party hat, I would push the brightly sprinkled piece of layer cake away from my plate, push palms up away against the effervescent sparkling drink.